Hey guys, this is P.M.R.Bonez88, and it's been a while since I've done the horror slasher movies and the superhero movies. So now I'll be continuing going back on those genres. So I'll be talking about the horror slasher movie review that I'll be talking about, which is Child's Play. So this film came in 1988, so I was already born, and plus I was an infant, so I couldn't go in the movie theaters when I was a baby. And along they had horror slasher movies, so they were competing each other, and same with Child's Play. So this was like bringing all the horror genre at the same year and at the same time, so they were having a competition at each other. First time I ever saw this movie is when I rented it on VHS, and that was 10 years ago. And when I first saw it, I was, wow. Compared to the other Chucky sequels, the first one is actually better than the rest. I was saying, just to see this movie, just to bring out all the fear, and it was also a knockoff from My Buddy, but I never heard of that doll, I never heard of it, and never saw TV commercial, but this was in the 80s. The only doll that I used to know are the Cabbage Patch Kids. And Brad Dourif voicing as Chucky, he is an icon. No way no one could be the voice of Chucky except Brad Dourif. He is the man. And plus, he was also in, besides Chucky movies, he was in Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, and the Rob Zombie's Halloween franchises. Which I probably did say it from my last review when I reviewed about Curse of Chucky. So the movie actually starts out where Charles Lee Ray escapes from the detective, which is played by Chris Sanderson. He tries to get away from him, but after he gets shot and his partner runs away, and then he goes into the toy store, and then once again he gets shot again, and then he was starting to die, so he had to find somebody else, or so he had no other choice, but he tracked his soul into the dolls, and that's where he starts his voodoo. And seeing the clouds and visual effects, they're very intense, very scary. All of a sudden, the toy store totally explodes, and detective just only sees it's his body probably dead, and we see is the doll, so we're not too sure that the voodoo did work or it didn't work. So that's where it leaves us for suspense. So on to the next story. A little boy named Andy Barkley, which is played by Alex Vincent, he wanted a good guy doll for his birthday. His mother, Mrs. Barkley, which is played by Catherine Hicks from Seventh Heaven, and those of you who didn't know or isn't a Star Trek fan, she's also from a movie Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. So meanwhile, she gets lucky, and the bum actually gives her the doll, boy's birthday. And then after he finally gets the doll, he's very happy. His Aunt Maggie babysits Andy, and then after a while the TV turns on by itself, but he actually blames Andy for leaving the TV on and leaving the doll there, Chucky. But he tells his aunt that he didn't do it, but she didn't want to listen to him. She gets hit by a hammer and gets thrown herself out of the window. And then later Mrs. Barkley goes upstairs to be sure that her son was okay. Detective tries to figure out what happened to her Aunt Maggie, and he believes that Andy must have done it, that he must have killed his own aunt. But when Andy tries to figure out and just realize that he looked at Chucky's under his sneakers, white flowers under there, and he tries to tell the detective that Chucky did it, but fortunately he thinks that he was making up all these stories, and Mrs. Barkley was getting a little upset. Nobody believes Andy that the doll is alive and he's doing all the killing. Not his mother, not the cops, not even the detective. So he's been taking all the blames for it, and that's where the next day where Andy and Chucky goes up to meeting his old pal Eddie Caputo. Somehow someone goes in there, but we see is a hand, like a doll hand, so we realize to think that it was the little boy, but unfortunately he was outside, shoots something, he shoots the gas, and that's where the house blows up. And after Andy goes into the police station, and somehow he winds up sent into the mental institution. So now Mrs. Barkley was deeply upset, and she looks at the doll, and all of a sudden when she picks up the box and the batteries were there, next she goes in to look at the doll, and then all of a sudden turns his head and just says, "Hi, I'm Chucky, wanna play?" Mrs. Barkley freaks out and realizing that the doll was alive. And she threatens her, talk to her, or she'll throw him in the fire. And all of a sudden, we realize at the end that the doll just like comes to life and starts swearing, and that was my best favorite scene. It comes to life, starts swearing, starts like goes all crazy, and then so after Mrs. Barkley goes meet up the detective and tries to tell him that his son was telling the truth and the doll was alive. He didn't believe him, so she tried to find the bum. But when she finds him, and later when she finds him, all of a sudden he starts to like mess with her, starts to like almost harass her, like saves her, and all of a sudden he tries to tell her where he get the doll come from, and he tells them at the old abandoned toy store where it got blown up. And that's where the detective gets a little like surprised and concerned about it. But then later on, he like takes Mrs. Barkley home and tries to go home as well, until Chucky, however, like hides in the back seat and then starts strangling him. And then after a while, all of a sudden the car trips out, and then he was trapped and stuck inside the car while Chucky was running around. So he was circling him, so there was no way he couldn't get out. Right up until he was getting ready to attack him, he just shots him and then he gets away. All the visual effects were very good, and even with the robotic and the puppeteers, how they made the doll and how they make him like trying to make him from a good guy friendly doll to a horrifying, sinister, most killing human that he turns out to be. Up to that almost very ending where all of a sudden Chucky gets caught on fire, and then all of a sudden he's all burned, and that was the end of him. But then after a while he like gets up, and the climactic very ending where Chucky's now like all burned and all scarred up and melting down. I think that was a good scene, just to see him all ugly and how a monstrosity he becomes now. And almost where Mrs. Barkley like shots him multiple times. He shots him in the head and shots him in the arms. This guy is a beast. He doesn't know when to give up or when to say no. When his partner tries to find him and all the body parts were all taken, he takes the head, and then the body was disappearing, and then just like surprisingly starts choking him, strangling him. I don't think that was that point. It starts to get a little silly and it starts to get really too funny and ridiculous. The detective just shoots him right in the heart because that was his weakness and that's the only way to kill him. So that was the end of Chucky. So after done talking about this movie, and this film was actually a good classic, most epic horror movie ever. It's even my least favorite. Chucky's my least favorite slasher icon compared to my other favorites like Freddy, Jason, Michael, Leatherface, and Pinhead. Chucky is down to my sixth and least favorite horror slasher icon. With the director Tom Holland, he did a great job, and executive producer David Kushner, who has done producing most of the Chucky franchises from 1 through Curse of Chucky. Just to rate this movie, I would have to give this a 88 out of 100. Sure, this movie is only my least, and it didn't really scare me, not too much. It actually made me laugh most often, like most of the scenes, because seeing a killer doll just like coming after you, doing voodoo magic, and all of a sudden stabbing you or strangling you to death, it's just hilarious. It's just a most horrifying, a little comedy movie as well. And I do own this movie on Blu-ray and DVD. And this is P.M.R.Bonez88 signing off and saying is, peace!